Welcome to Peerless members only video section. I am Katie North and today we're going to be doing a painting of latte art. So this is a very quick kind of a warm-up tutorial too, very simple. I have not sped up the video at all, so you'll be able to paint along right with me and we should be done just in about 20 minutes. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get started. All right, to get started, you're going to want to draw your circles, and I am using a candle because I couldn't find my compass, which a compass would probably be a lot easier. But basically you want your outer ring, which is your plate that the coffee cup is on, and then the inner ring, which is the coffee cup. And then before we start painting, you kind of want to add some guidelines. So you want there to be a second ring really close to the edge of your plate ring, and then a ring around the very edge of your coffee cup too. And you'll be able to see that in a little bit further of the clip. But those are going to be kind of your highlight areas to make your plate look like it has dimension and it's not just floating, and where your light sources are going to go. All right, so once you have your rings and your outer rings and kind of giving an idea of where the edges of your coffee cup and the actual plate that the coffee cup is on is going to be, we're going to want to add the coffee cup handle, which I'm doing over there on the right. And then we're going to add our spoon. So mine's kind of tucked under the coffee cup so you don't see the round part of the spoon, just kind of the stem of it. And then that's just pretty simple. Now we're gonna add that, like the colors in there later that kind of show the shadows and then the highlights. So you just want kind of like, you know, basically just a stick coming out from underneath your coffee cup. Next, we are going to do just some basic outlines for our latte foam art area. And basically, it's just kind of like hearts and then C shapes coming out from either side of the heart all the way down. And they're just gonna kind of act as guides. So the one thing I would say about these outlines is draw them pretty softly, just because if you want an area to be white and or like a lighter cream, if you have the pencil line's gonna show through. So the lighter that you do these, the more soft and without lines your painting's going to have too. So basically just a heart and then little opposite mirror C shapes coming down into a point on the bottom. And we're only using 3 colors today. So we are using the contour for our coffee color, and we're using black for our very diluted transparent coffee cup. The coffee cup is white, and we're using just barely a touch of the black for all of our shadowing. And then we're using the contour and mahogany brown in the table below that gives it more of the wood grain. So once you're done with your drawing, we're going to start our painting, and you're going to use the contour first, and you're going to do the outer ring and like the outer ring above and below the heart shapes that you drew inside the coffee cup, and then every other heart shape that you drew, you're going to do the contour to kind of highlight those white areas to make them look like they're the rings. All right, so you can see a little bit more clearly. So you're making that outer ring, heart, and then every other kind of line area that you drew, you're going to be filling in with the contour. And then while it's wet too, because a lot of the coffee art has like more rings of color in there, but they're like still the darker areas, you can do the wet on wet and add more or less of the contour, because this layers beautifully, so you can get more of like a brown and that warmer kind of color for the softer area. And then you can kind of get a few varying colors of this contour in your coffee cup. So now we're gonna start our coffee cup and plate. And you wanna make sure you wipe off all of the extra brown off your paintbrush, because you don't want any of that tinting, because we're using such a small amount. And you can see that outer ring that I drew on the coffee cup, or the coffee cup itself, and then the outer ring I drew on the plate is gonna act as a guide for this first wash of watercolor. So you're gonna go all the way to that outer ring, but leave that area blank on the outer ring of the plate and the outer ring of the cup. And that's just gonna kind of give you that little bit of lift and make the plate look a little bit more three-dimensional. So the next step is we're going to let our plate and our coffee dry, and we're going to be working on the table. So this one I want to be a really soft wood grain, maybe just a really light color. And so I'm going to fill up the entire page with water and just get it just nice and wet, not like soaking wet, but damp. And then in the vertical lines that the wood grain is showing, I'm going to use the contour again and start kind of laying out where those lines in that directional way that you want your kind of eyes to focus. That's kind of like, I'm going to do them in parallel lines starting from top to bottom and kind of give you that idea that they're all traveling in the same direction. And since the paper is wet, you're going to be able to get a soft blend of that color to make it like a very light wood grain, but you're also going to get some of those lines when you first lay down those lines, but they're going to be a little bit softer. So that just kind of helps blend it out over all of it. And then the next layer we do on the wood grain is going to be able to show you actual wood grains and shadows. So think of these ones more as just laying down color and the directional lines. All right, so we filled up the entire table now, and now we can kind of go back through with the mahogany brown, which is just a little bit lighter or a little bit darker. And then you can add a couple more lines and then start to begin the shadow on the edge of the coffee cup. And just kind of blend as much as you want or as little, but those lines are going to act as the wood grain. Alrighty, so now that our coffee cup is dry, we are able to do the next layer. And this layer is just going to give us a little bit more dimension in our coffee cup and kind of place shadows. So I'm deciding that my light source is coming from the top left corner. And so the shadows are going to be on the bottom left corner of the coffee cup. And So you kind of want to make a lip or an edge that kind of shows the highlight of that top right corner to make that white area super bright. And then the darkest shadows are going to be on the left side. So that's going to get more the shape and the roundness of the coffee cup, but further down. And you'll be able to see it a little bit more once I work on it, just a tad bit more. But you can kind of see it start to take shape a little bit more once we start adding these shadows. And then working around the plate a little bit more and adding just a fine shadow on the table. I think the table's still a little bit wet at this point too, so I go back and add another shadow once it's dry and I get a little bit more of a crisp line, but I do add a little bit of a shadow now too, just to kind of start the process. So we're also going to add our shadow onto our spoon handle, and I leave a little gap at the end of it. That's just because I want there to be a little bit of warmth in the shine of the handle. So it's not the highlighted area, which is on the left side, but it goes from kind of dark shadow, kind of that contour orangey color, and then the cool shadow again. And that just shows that it's a reflective source and that it's not just only going to do a highlight and then a shadow, but if there's something warm around it, like the table is warm, maybe there's just something else that like around the area that it's picking up a little bit of warmth on the actual spoon. That kind of makes it look a little bit more realistic too, and not just having the whole spoon be a cool and silver shadow. So now we're going back into our coffee art, latte art area, and I'm doing another ring around the very edge of a darker, so that second layer of contour, and then I'm adding some frothy bubbles, and it's really just tiny, tiny, tiny bubbles in the darker areas of the coffee. And then if I want to add some more defined kind of strokes of the little heart shapes that were like another layer, like the espresso was a little bit darker and you get another little ring of the heart but in a darker brown, you can add those now too. Alright, so now that my first and second washes are done of my cup and plate shadow, I just want to do one more shadow of the darkest areas, which are going to be on the very edge of the cup and then the spoon and then the very edge of the bottom of the cup just a little bit. And that's just the finishing darkest area of the shadows to kind of make it pop a little bit more. All right, so the next step, we are mixing our mahogany brown and black in a separate dish, and I am using a different brush. So I'm not using the water reservoir brush, because the water reservoir brush, if you push it a little bit too much, you'll get more diluted and more water mixed with your paint. For this, I want there to be a cohesive top to bottom. All of the wood grain looks the same. And so I'm mixing that tone together and putting it in an extra dish, and then using my watercolor brush for the detail. And I know that all of that color is going to be the same because I've made a larger amount puddle of it, and I'm just using my brush to the puddle and not adding more or less water as I'm going. So for this, you're gonna outline the, the right hand side of the cup, and probably not the cup, just the plate that's on the table for the darkest shadow on the table. And then we're gonna be doing all of our wood grain. So the wood grain, I'm going in those diagonal lines, but now this time the diagonal lines are going to be sharper because the paper is dry, and so you'll be able to get nice crisp lines. And then depending on how diluted and transparent your watercolor brown is, you can kind of do swirlies or kind of wood grain shapes, however you want to pick up some of those textures. But just, now that you have that mixture all together, it'll be a little bit easier to work top to bottom without having to run out of paint. And you can see I did a couple skips in the lines and a couple like small swirls, and then just little knots and kind of divots in the wood just to give it a little bit more realistic and lived in look. All right, and for the very finaling touches, I am using that same extra fine detail brush with my black, and I'm doing just a few black outlines on the darkest shadows and on the very edge of my spoon, just to make sure that there's that nice clean definition between the spoon and the plate and the table. And that is basically, I think, everything that we're doing. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Definitely let me know if you like the more sped up and lots of instruction, or if you like it slowed down and instruction as we go. And yeah, these definitely, especially in the private classes, we would love to engage a lot more with you guys and see what you're interested in and as you're working with the projects, how it's going. And we love, love, love to see your paintings too. So talk away, fill up those comments, and we will do our best to reply to every single one of you. And yeah, I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you next time. And if you have any questions or comments or even desired tutorials, make sure to add them to our comment section and we will try to get them into our class schedule. So yeah, this one's really for you guys. So let us know what you would like.